35. Cocktails, rivers and Sir John Cutler's stockings. A cocktail unshaken or unstirred can quickly cease to be a cocktail, for the ingredients separate. When wanting a gin and tonic, your want may not be divisible, such that you want a gin, whatever the outcome regarding the tonic, or vice versa. A gin and tonic needs to be mixed, and it is the mixture you want. Those simple examples remind us that some items are what they are and remain the same only if they have parts with some swirl, some mixing of ingredients. Even if the parts remain constant, the items may not, and that can be simply because of absence of swirl, absence of mixing. The cocktail ceased to be, yet the ingredients remained. Rivers remain, yet the ingredients change. An oft-cited remark in connection with this is from the early 5th century BC ancient Greek philosopher, Heraclitus. You cannot step into the same river twice. Quick-fired responses have been that you cannot even step into the same river once. They may depend on a logical point that stepping into the same implies stepping more than once. They may, though, be relying on the fact that the waters are forever changing, whether you step once or twice. What may have intrigued Heraclitus, and what has intrigued later philosophers, is that when Heraclitus first bathed in the river, he was indeed bathing in some water. The river consisted of just that water and nothing else. Yet the next time he bathed in the same river, because the waters had flowed, he bathed in some different water, even though the river was the same river. How can the river be the same, yet the water be different? The river is, of course, extended in space, so, at one and the same time, two different people may be bathing in the same river yet in different patches of water, just as two people may be seeing the same mountain, yet one sees its bare rock to the south and the other its forests to the north. Some would then urge that the river be thought of as stretched not merely in space but also in time, as having not merely spatial but also temporal parts. We may then account for how bathing at the same location, in the same river, but at different times, may involve bathing in different waters. Strictly speaking, a dangerous expression, Heraclitus bathed in one temporal slice of river, identical with a patch of water, at one moment on one day. He then bathed in a distinct temporal slice of the river, identical with a different patch of water, at a later time. The first temporal slice is not identical with the second, but both are slices of the one temporally extended river. Thinking of items, such as rivers, pokers and people, as collections of temporal slices, though, seems to lose the idea that one and the same thing endures yet changes. A more obvious response to the Heraclitean aphorism is to resist the identity of the river with its waters, making instead the common-sense observation that a river is composed of water. One and the same river is composed of ever-changing waters, otherwise it would not be a river, but perhaps a long thin lake. What makes something one and the same river does not depend on its possessing the same composition, the same watery ingredients, over time, and, with cocktails in mind, even when something has the same ingredients, it does not follow that it is the same item. Heraclitus, in his thinking, may have simply been making, albeit enigmatically, that common sense point. Indeed, he offers a cocktail example: the barley drink disintegrates if it is not stirred. Changes in composition can be essential to the identity of a thing. That the river yesterday is the same river as the one today does not amount to its having the same composition. But then, what does make it the same river? Sir John Cutler, of the 17th century, was much attached to his black worsted stockings, so attached that, as holes developed, his maid would darn them, with silken thread. Eventually, his stockings no longer consisted of the original material, but of silk. The composition of his stockings was clearly different. Yet, it could reasonably be said, they remained the same stockings, in that they possessed a continuity through space and time and were used by Sir John to cover his legs to fine effect. What made them the same stockings did not depend on material sameness, but on continuity, ownership and function. And what makes something the same river depends on location, usually a long geographical continuity, and changing waters flowing into a sea. A river may be the same river over time, even if during a period it runs dry, but is later replenished. And there will be times when we are unsure what to say, when rivers flow into each other. It may seem not to matter until, so to speak, it matters, as when there may be disputes about land or irrigation or fishing rights. Here is a much discussed further example. As the parts of Duke Theseus' ship wore out, they were replaced, plank by plank, sail by sail, rope by rope, until as with Sir John's stockings, not one of the original parts remained in the ship. The tale of Theseus' ship, though, has a twist. Suppose scavengers hoarded all the worn-out planks and other parts cast asunder, and then reconstructed the original ship, admittedly excessively shabby and unseaworthy. Which is really Theseus' ship, the one now composed of new parts, yet in Theseus' continual ownership, or the shabby one consisting of the original materials? We may again be tempted by the thought that there is no, really, about it, just a matter of decision. Here, though, it is a decision with consequences, especially if Theseus' new-looking ship is lost at sea, yet insurance companies refuse to pay out, claiming that the ship insured was the one composed of the same material, not the one now lost. Identity itself can make us feel bewildered, at sea, especially when we raise the question of the identity of ourselves. It is all very well speaking of its just being a matter of stipulation, of decision, of words, which ship counts as Theseus, or when a river counts as the same river, but when we think of a person continuing over time, yet also changing, whatever makes her or him the same person? Now, that does matter and is highly puzzling. Look out for the awakening of Isaac Newton, if Isaac Newton he be. 36. A goat with gaps. I have a goat, one goat only. She sits quietly and still on my left, listening to Purcell. In front of me is a doorway. Through the doorway wanders a creature, a goat. She looks like mine. I can still spy my goat to the left, so the doorway goat is no goat of mine. What I saw afforded me no evidence that the entering beast is my goat. Mine still sits, quietly and still, on my left. One goat cannot wholly be in two spatially distinct and discontinuous places at the same time. One goat cannot be two. I have a goat, as before. She sits, quietly and still, on my left, listening to Purcell. I nod off. When I wake, a few minutes later, no animal is there to my left. A creature wanders through the doorway, a goat. She looks like mine. What I see affords me some evidence for thinking the doorway creature is my goatish beast. With no other goat in the vicinity, I conclude that the goat wandering in is indeed mine. One goat can change its location over a period of time. One goat can change its location over a period of time, but must there not be spatial continuity and proximity between its locations over that time? Must it not be possible to trace a spatially continuous line, through time, of the goat's locations from, in this example, its position on my left and its later position in the doorway? Such spatial continuity is, of course, expected, but must such spatial continuity exist for my goat to be one and the same goat over time? Puzzlingly, many people think so. Must my goat exist without gaps over time? Suppose the nodding off scenario as before, yet with absolutely no sign of my goat having tiptoed round my sleeping form, no sign of my goat having skipped through an open window, then having raced round to the doorway, no sign of the house having been deroofed, a crane having lifted my goat, the goat then being dropped unharmed and unfazed at the doorway, the roof being neatly returned to the correct position. To sum up, there is no sign at all of continuous movement by the aforementioned goat from my left to the doorway. Yet various signs, Loy of Purcell, birthmark near left hoof, front, familiar dulcet tones, all point to the beast that now enters being my goat. Why should we insist that, for her to be my goat, the selfsame goat, she must have traveled across continuous spatial locations from my left to the doorway? Some insist for the following reason. Suppose the discontinuity were to occur. Perhaps for some time my goat ceases to exist, then seemingly reappears in a new location without passing through adjacent locations. Assuming such discontinuities are accepted, we could then conceive of different circumstances after my goat vanishes. For example, two goats subsequently appear, one to my left, one to my right. They both look just like mine. Without spatial continuity there would be no good reason for my believing my goat to have reappeared on the left rather than on the right. And my single goat could not now somehow manage to exist in two places at once. Because of the above replication possibility, and we could expand the story from two to any number of goats, and to vast distances between them, the single goat now appearing in the doorway, after a discontinuity, cannot be mine. A single case of discontinuity brings about a conceivable case of multi-goats, and with a twosome or more, there would be nothing that made one of the resultant goats my original goat. Can we, though, uncover a feature that, outweighing the lack of spatial continuity, preserves the identity of the goat as my goat? We return to my goat. I know her well. I take her for walks. I listen to Purcell with her. She is pretty and a pretty constant companion. To date, she is a regular goat. One day an odd thing happens. As she frolics in the field, she vanishes before my very eyes. Her disappearance is for but a few minutes. Perhaps I was distracted. Perhaps I have imbibed excess whiskey and am tired. Thereafter, every few days, similar gaps in her life, goatee gaps, occur. Perhaps they even become prolonged. Others notice the gapping. Here, we could develop different stories. After each disappearance, she reappears in exactly the same location and state as before, or maybe she is a few minutes distance further on, at average goat traveling speed. Her goat's goatee is in the exact position relative to her body as a few minutes earlier, or maybe it is now more ruffled, in line with the blowing of the wind. Scientists investigate. They are baffled. Their tests show that in all respects, despite the gaps, she is qualitatively the same goat. 2 1-pound coins, though, are qualitatively the same, yet one is mine, the other is yours. The coins are numerically different. So, is the goat that appears my, numerically the same, goat each time? There could be motives for different answers. On the one hand, maybe my goat has just won the annual goatish prize, with a lucrative contract. So, this goat appearing after a few minutes delay, or this goat coming through the doorway, had better still be mine. On the other hand, maybe I have an insurance policy that pays out on my goat's demise, so I would prefer this goat before me not to be deemed mine. But whether this goat is my goat is surely not an arbitrary decision or deeming. There must be some facts of the matter. What facts can there be, once we have run through shape, hoof prints and bleat patterns, through genes and iris scans? The answer, given earlier, is spatial continuity. But why should that be thought a necessary condition for numerical sameness? In learning the term, same, in the sense of one and the same individual, spatial continuity is typically present, but that does not show that it is essential to our grasp of one and the same. My gappy goat, frolicking in the field, retains a regularity in activity and structure, despite the gaps. When I feed her, even if some goatish gaps then occur, she remains fed, for a bit. If she becomes, with kid, her pregnancy continues roughly for the typical duration, and so on. To deploy a suggestion from the great 17th century Leibniz, for there to be the same continuing individual, there must be an active principle of unity. Unity through regularity is the key. In our regular world, this regularity underlies the usual gap-free continuity, but, as our goat tail shows, such underlying regularity is consistent with spatial gaps. My goat remains a unity, albeit with gaps. When regularity has gone, we doubt sameness of item. When the bottle is smashed, destroyed, the smithereens do not perform as one. After the mother gives birth, the behavior of the child soon lacks spatial regularity in relationship to mother. It is the regularity in behavior that holds an item, a creature, together as a unity. Such regularity leads us to think of a swarm of bees, even a flock of sheep, as items with some unity. Contrast with the hand and book, page 189. The proposed, active principle of unity, for an item to remain the same, even a gappy one, may itself appear exposed to replication puzzles. After a gap, 2 or 202 goats could appear, all exhibiting the same regularity with the original. We should be unable to determine which one is my goat. The replication argument, though, could also be used against the sameness of any standard spatio-temporally continuous entity, such as a goat. We could dream up thought experiments whereby a regular goat spontaneously divides into numerous goats all like the original. We could therefore argue that even with a single goat, the existence of a goat a moment later cannot be taken to be the existence of the same goat. Yet that conclusion would be absurd, for we should have lost all idea of one and the same entity persisting through time. Of course, gaps could get out of hand. We could imagine goats ceasing to be, then popping up years later in different parts of the universe. We may then anguish philosophically whether they could be numerically the same goats. In such cases, the required principle of unity would seem to be lacking, though who knows quite what is being imagined in such bizarre cases. Thought experiments need to be handled with care. Our concepts are grounded in this world to date. If possible replications are to be treated seriously, they cannot be used to undermine our normal understanding of items remaining numerically the same through time. Our modest gappy goat tail is a thought experiment, but it is not one thought too far. It makes perfectly good sense. My goat may continue as my goat, numerically the same, even with the gaps. Thus we see how what makes a creature one and the same creature over time is neither spatial continuity nor arbitrary linguistic decision. Rather, it is a question of how well the creature, the biological chunk, hangs together. Pondering further, we should see that applies as much to human beings as to goats. For your human life to be the self-same life through time, well, how well do your values, memories and intentions, your character traits, physical features and abilities, hang together?